Hello BookTube, welcome back to my channel. My name is Juan. I am just one reader, your favorite Mexican booktuber who reads in English. I am super excited because today I will be sharing with you my top 10 books of 2024. This is my favorite video to make every single year. It's the reason why I read the way that I read. This video right here that you're watching is really the entire purpose of my having a channel, having a Goodreads, keeping track of everything that I read and just everything that goes on backstage in the corners of my twisted, weird mind. This is why I do what I do. So hopefully by the end of this video, you will have a lot of recommendations added to your TBR, and hopefully you might meet one of your new favorite books of all time with this video. I will be ranking my top 10 according to enjoyment, just the subjective experience that I had with that particular book in that particular period in time in which I read it this year. So take everything that I will say with a grain of salt. But anyway, these are my favorite books of the year, and I will not really describe the books as much as you would think. I'm just going to tell you why I think they deserve a spot on this here list, why I think these books are unforgettable, memorable, and exceptional. So here's my top 10. So coming in at number 10, Salt, Sugar, Fat by Michael Moss, Pulitzer Prize winner. This is nonfiction. It's investigative journalism about food companies, food engineering, and basically how evil capitalist corporations want to get you hooked and addicted to their products, their goods, the foods that they have so expertly crafted, so devilishly, artificially created in order for you to not be able to stop buying them and get sick and eventually die. This is a very tragic book because it's real life horror, as I love to say. This book was very, very thrilling. I thought it was my kind of nonfiction. It's about a topic that I really enjoy reading about, which is food and our consumption of these kinds of foods that sometimes people don't understand just how toxic and bad and evil they are. It's brilliantly written. It's super engaging. The storytelling, even though it's nonfiction, is really, really good. It's crackling storytelling. And I actually think this book is very informative, and it gives us a lot of really important tactics to think about the food that we buy and what we shouldn't be putting into our bodies. Then coming in at number 9, Burnham Wood by Eleanor Catton. This book was very surprising. I was expecting to like it, considering that Eleanor Catton is an author whose work I have previously really enjoyed, particularly her novel, her debut novel, The Rehearsal. It was one of my favorite books of last year. So I expected to like this book, but I never quite anticipated what this book would be and the way that it would deliver what it delivered. This book is thrilling, it's suspenseful, it does a lot of things, it juggles a lot of genres, a lot of things at the same time. I don't know quite how to describe it. So the first part of the book is kind of a character in-depth portrayal of these characters. These are characters that are all egotistical and supremely narcissistic, but there's good and there's bad, but they're still annoying narcissists. So it's very entertaining. And then there's this kind of philosophical ideas floating around as well. This is one of those like discourse heavy books, but it's super interesting. And then the book sort of becomes Succession, especially if you've seen Succession from HBO season 1, that episode where Kendall kills the guy in the car. If you know, you know. It sort of becomes very much that, but in a very literary heavy kind of way, and I was enthralled and thrilled all the way. It was a really, really unique original book. Then coming in at number 8, Yellow Face by R.F. Kuang. This book was just devilishly entertaining. It was mean-spirited, it was dark, it was twisted. It reminded me a lot of that TV show from Netflix, Beef, which was a great show. Actually, I would recommend, if you watch Beef, read this, and also if you like this, go and watch Beef, because they are very much hand in hand, I think. This book had a lot to say in terms of ideas, and thematically, I think it was a very important book in terms of many different topics like identity and authorship and just race, many things. But it was just devilishly entertaining. It was kind of cruel, it was kind of dark, it was very funny. And it was a book that came to me at the start of 2024, and I remember that it just put me in such a good mood. It just made me smile. Every single time that I would pick this book up, I knew I would be hooked. I knew that I would want to keep the pages turning, so it was just a great experience. Coming in at number 7, I have a tie. I have Mariana by Monica Dickens and Boy's Life by Robert McCammon. These books, I am putting them in the same spot because I read them back to back during the summer, and also they are quite similar, even though they could seem very different. They are both coming-of-age stories. They deal with the impossibilities and the delights and the horrors of growing up. They are very different in terms of setting and character, and everything is just very different. This has the feel of a Steven Spielberg movie. It has that kind of fantasy, adventure, sci-fi story with some horror elements. And it just captures that magic of like Back to the Future, you know, like that E.T., that kind of vibe, like riding a bike and there's magic everywhere. It's about a boy, and it's about a year in this boy's life, as the title suggests. And whereas this one, Mariana, is more subtle, it's more elegant in a way. The writing style is very lush and beautiful. It's set in London, and they might seem very different, but they are kind of the same thing, just with different packaging, if you know what I mean. I love coming-of-age stories that really get us into the minds of interesting characters, and I just didn't want to part with any of these characters. Coming in at number 6, The Age of Madness trilogy by Joe Abercrombie, which consists of A Little Hatred, The Trouble with Peace, and The Wisdom of Crowds. I think maybe I'm not as big a fan of Joe Abercrombie's as many people here on BookTube are. I've sort of had a ambivalent, I would say, ambivalent enough relationship with Joe Abercrombie. Some of his books I have really adored, and then some others I have had some serious qualms with. Yeah. However, The Age of Madness was just, I think, overall his most solid piece of work thus far. Yeah. I thoroughly enjoyed this trilogy, which is a fantasy trilogy that doesn't really have enough fantasy for me. That's the only thing that makes me sort of, there's not a lot of fantasy here for a fantasy. But that being said, I thoroughly enjoy the character work. The dialogue is incredible. These books are super engrossing. You can't put them down. And these are books that have a lot to say. These books are very much like the HBO drama Succession, where I guess the lesson at the end of the day is people are evil, and the people in power will always be corrupt, and even the good people who get to be in positions of power will eventually get corrupted, and they will fuck things up, and good people will always lose. And it's just a very demoralizing but harshly true idea, and these books just masterfully play with that idea. And yeah, have I mentioned characters are great in these books, and I just love Abercrombie's humor, and just overall his his turn of phrase. Really, really good stuff. Then coming in at number 5, I have a novel, which is a standalone novel, Father of Lies by Brian Evenson. This is a book that I would heavily recommend to people who are looking for something short, something really easy to digest, although it might be quite dark and hard to stomach, but easy enough to read, and something that will definitely get you out of a reading slump. If you need an antidote to that, this is the book for you. Father of Lies tells the story of this man who is severely mentally ill. He is a pervert. He is kind of schizophrenic. Well, I'm not going to spoil anything, but he's a very, very ill individual, and he happens to be, again, in a position of power. I love stories about power dynamics and people who are corrupted in positions of power, apparently, just like I just mentioned the Age of Madness trilogy. Well, again, the same thing happens in here. We have this man who is severely mentally unstable and ill, and he's a pervert. And he is a pastor in this church. He's a man of the church, and he is a pedophile. Not just a pedophile. If only he were a pedophile. No, there's just many things severely wrong with this man. This man is also a patient of a psychoanalyst, and being a psychoanalyst in real life myself, I found it incredibly entertaining and funny to read about a fictional psychoanalyst, a character who is a psychoanalyst. It's very hard for me to come by, these characters who share my profession, because my profession is really not common at all. So we follow this psychoanalyst as he tries to analyze and crack open the case that is this man. It's a very interesting story. I won't spoil what happens with this man, but let me tell you, this book goes in a very dark direction. It gets really dark, but it's incredibly thrilling. It's super engrossing. You can't put it down. It's just a really wonderful tale in the way that it's told. Brian Evenson's storytelling chops, wonderful, wonderful use of the English language. Now, coming in at number 4, a book about actual psychoanalysis. This is nonfiction. It's my favorite nonfiction that I read this year. Psychoanalysis, The Impossible Profession by Janet Malcolm. Janet Malcolm was a journalist, and she was interviewing many people in different fields, in different professions. And in this case, she is interviewing this famous but anonymous psychoanalyst. And she just asks him about what it is, what it's like to be a psychoanalyst, what you have to do in order to become a psychoanalyst, and just, all the ins and outs, all the inner secrets and details and little gossip about the psychoanalytical world. And being a psychoanalyst, I found this book absolutely my kind of book. It was gossipy, it was profound, it was humane, it was even if you are not a psychoanalyst or a patient of psychoanalysis, I think this book is just luminous. It contains so much truth about the human condition and about, psychoanalysis is all about working with people in order to help them see themselves and get reacquainted with themselves, which sounds very corny, but it really isn't an easy thing to do, and it's really hard, and it's really it's really, really hard to do sometimes. And getting to see what he says about becoming a psychoanalyst and all the trials and tribulations that we face in this world that almost doesn't want people to be acquainted with themselves is wonderful. So I just adored this kind of nonfiction. Okay, we are down to the top 3. So these are the creme de la creme, the cream of the crop. Coming in at number 3, The Spear Cuts Through Water. This is a book that some people are recommending this year a lot here on BookTube, and I could not be happier. This book deserves so much praise and recognition and accolades and awards and prizes. it just deserves all the honors. This book is true fantasy. This book is the antidote to all of the Brandon Sandersons out there who are destroying good fantasy, in my humble opinion. No, this is the promise. This is the hope. This is what fantasy can give us, I think, as readers of the genre. I love the fantasy genre. It's my favorite genre. But it's very seldom that I come across good, interesting, awe-inspiring fantasy. And this is it. This is where it's at. The Spear Cuts Through Water. Look, it might not be the best plot. It might not be the best world or the best characters, but it's just so completely unique. And it's so rare nowadays to come across a book that is actually original and unique and that is doing things that no one else is quite doing. And the way that the book and the author play with storytelling and language and the form and the format, the structure, this book was an unforgivable experience. Then coming in at number 2, my favorite standalone novel of the year, Temporada de Huracanes by Fernanda Melchor. This was translated to English as Hurricane Season. Temporada de Huracanes, or Hurricane Season, is just luminous. This is, I think, the highest level possible of what a novel can do, what the format of a novel can do. In my opinion, I think this is the best example of what a good novel can achieve in terms of language. I don't think there's anyone that I have read this year that I could put like on the same level as Fernanda Melchor, just in terms of the use of language, how she employs realistic language that we use in Mexico nowadays to also convey something that is so profound and poetic, and just how she plays with structure. This book is told in a very particular way, and the way that the book is written, like the blocks of text, make for a very particular rhythmic experience reading that evokes almost like a fever in the reader, and it's just nothing short of spectacular. This is one of those books that I could say really took my breath away. I was like completely, I was breathless when I read it. Like, I read this book in like a couple sittings, and I just couldn't put my mind anywhere else. I was completely flooded by this book. This book floored me, and the movie adaptation on Netflix is also remarkable. And finally, my number 1 read, or reading experience, I should say, of 2024 has to be the Hawthorne and Horowitz series by Anthony Horowitz. It's a series, it's an ongoing series. It's a series that is still in publication, and so thus far we only have the first 5 books published, and I read all of them in 2024, and they are just the best time that I had reading in 2024. So book 1 is The Word is Murder. This is one of my favorites. The second book, The Sentence is Death, is also really, really good. Then book 3 was sort of a letdown, but I still enjoyed at least the characters, if not the setting or the mystery. In this particular one, which is A Line to Kill, I still really enjoyed the characters, and Anthony Horowitz's voice as an author is always magnificent. Book 4 was probably my favorite, The Twist of a Knife, just because it goes into the world of theater, musicals, plays, actors, actresses, screenwriting, just playwriting, I should say. It goes into that kind of theatrical world, and it is right up my alley. And then book 5, Close to Death, which was another one of my favorites. So really, this is a fantastic series that I have really, really clicked with. I have really resonated with the books. And if you don't know this series is a meta series of murder mystery fiction. Anthony Horowitz writes himself into the books. He is one of the co-protagonists of the series, and he, along with a shady, mysterious Sherlock Holmes kind of figure, Hawthorne, they go investigating these crimes, but then things get more complex, more meta, and more weird and interesting. What I love the most is Anthony Horowitz himself. As an author, he has this voice, these storytelling chops. The way that he writes, the way that he does everything is, to me, it's like candy. It's like crack. It's like something I can't not love. I just absolutely love his style, and everything that I have read by him has been 5 stars, pretty much. So that's what I have for you. Those are my top 10 books of 2024. I hope that with this list you have now some interesting books to try out. Hopefully these recommendations will be useful. So thank you for another year of sticking up with me, with my weird sense of humor, my shenanigans, and everything that I do here on this channel. Thanks for watching. I am just one reader, and before I go, I need to ask you to leave some comments and some recommendations, because I want to keep reading what you recommend to me. I'm always interested in finding more jewels, more recommendations. So any information that you can give me will be very useful, and I will take it into consideration. Thanks for watching. I am just one reader, and I will see you on the next video.